Welcome back to Track Talk. This is week 9 of the 1830 League. This is the second to last week, and I think that the tournament organizers have mentioned that they will be doing a tournament for the league players at the end of this, so we may cover that as well. This week we are going to be very aggressive in skipping through the games, and we're actually going to start with Game B. The auction here is unremarkable, and the first stock round is going to have a 3 company float, the CNO, PRR, and the NYNH. So we're going to skip that and we'll just look and see that they all have in fact floated. The first OR, they all lay standard track. The second stock round, we're also going to entirely skip because it's just paying shares. In OR2, the only thing that happens that's interesting is the CNO withholds. Otherwise, everyone else is operating normally. Now in SR3, things begin to speed up, so we're actually going to go through this. We're going to see that Too Many Revenants is going to sell out, and we'll be floating a company here, the NYC. And if we look at the map, the NYC and the NYNH are set up to synergize with one another. We are still early in the game here, so it's important to watch which of these companies operates last or first. And if you are NYNH player, you have an expensive private, you may want to sell a share here and try and operate behind the NYC, who you know is going to be buying trains. But that doesn't end up happening, and we will pass into operating round 3. NYNH is up. We'll just run its track. NYC is going to buy a 2 train, PRR, heading towards Pittsburgh. We're still in yellow. And then the CNO is the only player to actually get in their privates. So they buy 3 2 trains and the 3, and we'll have a lot more cash than the rest of the players as a result. Devouring is going to be taking the B&O here, and that will be in addition to his CNO. We'll see Too Many Revenants make a half-hearted effort at protecting it, but then just trashes it and buys paying shares. Everybody else is picking up these cheap shares that have been sold down. Too Many Revenants is going to go back for the NYNH. Devouring now has a secure B&O presidency and is going to buy a paying share. And then Too Many Revenants passes with about $200 left into the operating round as a result of having sold so heavily. First operation of the B&O, and they're actually going to head towards Atlantic City and Philadelphia. And they play this kind of safe. They just buy the single 3 train, not going to push and try and rust the 2 trains early. NYNH gets the upgrade in Albany and immediately tokens it, buys a 3. NYC is going to set up for the double loop into New York, and they are going to be pushing so that there are no 3s available for the other players. Doesn't have quite enough money to buy the 4, but they do accelerate the train rush. CNO links up with Pittsburgh, is going to immediately token it. It's probably going to want that token eventually, and this does allow him to run all 4 of his trains. So he's going to be running for 180. Probably not going to happen very many times. PRR, just a single 2 train, gets Lancaster. It's going to withhold it, buy the 4, and is not going to buy their private. Oh, they do buy the private for a 308. B&O gets the Philadelphia track. It's going to run his first run of the game. NYNH not going to lay the New York upgrade. Wants to make the NYC company pay for that, I suppose. NYC with 2 trains is heavily incentivized to do so, so it's going to run for 190 and pays it. CNO lays the Reading track and gets the token in Lancaster. CNO's runs are pretty much set for the game as a result of this. PRR upgrading Pittsburgh, not going to token it, and pays. We're into stock round 5, moving quickly. Everyone has a lot of cash now as a result of the private buy-ins. Devouring has the least, but that's just because he's basically a stock round ahead of everybody in terms of investing his cash. Devouring is going to buy his B&O. HGM is selling and taking the Erie. MP Coin selling as well, takes the B&M. Too Many Revenants also selling and will par the CPR. So the B&M was max parred. the Erie and CPR are just at 90. And if we look at the game state here, 3 new companies potentially floating. Looking at 3 4s, we could see the 5s come out here. So operating order between these companies is important. You probably want to operate later, assuming that one of these companies is going to start buying trains for you. The B&M float is interesting to look at because there is options for the B&M to get into New York and have decent revenue and track, but it's going to need the NYNH to help him so that the NYC doesn't immediately block it, which we've seen in several games over the past couple of weeks. The NYNH is basically guaranteed to operate before the NYC since they're both ledged. In fact, I think it is guaranteed that it will operate first. So shouldn't have a problem on the B&M, but MP Coin needs to actually make sure he takes advantage of that operating order. The rest of the stock round is basically these companies floating. There's a little bit of trashing that occurs. We'll just watch these companies float and monitor the operating order. So already we're seeing some change here where the Erie, I believe, was operating first and is now operating third. The other players haven't floated yet, so they may do something to counter that. Looks like the B&M is going to. And we have a new operating order. B&M is still operating first. Now, Too Many Revenants has put the B&M behind the CPR. I think if you're MP Coin, you're probably okay with that. This puts your 2 companies, the B&M and the NYNH, in close proximity to one another. You could potentially shuffle trains and try and bring out 2 5 trains in both companies, for instance, to avoid being train locked. You will have Devouring operating in between, of course, but I don't know that MP Coin is regretting this change in his operating order. Looks like everybody's just going back for some paying shares. Too Many Revenants buying the CNO, and I think we'll just pass here. We're into operating round 5. Erie is up. This player is going to orient themselves towards Rochester and does buy a 4 from the bank. CPR not suitcaseable, going to lay his track and is going to shuffle trains out of the NYC, presumably in an effort to avoid opening up a 4 and a 5 purchase on the B&M. B&M now gets the Providence lay, tokens it, buys a 4 from the depot, and is going to shuffle trains into the NYNH. So 2 players are playing a little bit of chicken with the train roster. B&O does have cash if they want to buy the 4 and the 5. In the CNO, the other company does not have much money, so maybe not in their interest to push trains, but would at least get a 5 if he were to do that. B&O operating Baltimore runs for 100. NYNH trainless does help the B&M. This is what we were looking for. And is going to buy the 4 and the 5. So that means that Too Many Revenants, in theory, could have bought 2 5s, but left a train in the company, so it's not going to be able to buy both 5s even with a withhold. A little bit of a poor outcome for him. Upgrades New York, runs his 3 train for 120, pays it, and does snag a 5. CNO, not enough cash for permanent trains, lays the track on Philly friendly with the B&O, his other company, which I suppose is reasonable. Doesn't give the PRR access to New York through Philly, so both of his company and the PRR are going to have to hit this DIT, which is a little bit less desirable, but then the other company, the B&O, is able to run into New York. Needs to watch this Philly city and make sure the PRR doesn't snag a token there. PRR has 2 tokens left, but it would need to withhold to get the cash for it. Running for 120, withholding. PRR, as noted, doesn't have all that much cash, but has good runs for right now. 180 withholds it. B&O, next operating round in the set, should be picking up a 5 train here. Runs for 110, withholds it, and does snag the 5. The Erie's now in position to grab a quick 6 if they want. Does withhold for it, and we see that happen. CPR is trainless, does have train responsibility, so it's going to shuffle a train out of the NYC. B&M, upgrading Providence, is withholding. I think a lot of players are really worried about these permanent trains here. We'll look at the game state in a second. NYC 450 trainless, and he's already shuffled with the CPR, so we know he doesn't have 2 permanent trains. Could just emergency buy the 6 here, and looks like he does. So that is going to put the other players in a little bit of trouble because they're all going to need D trains now. So if we look at the game state, MP is going to need a D train, HJM is going to need a D, and Devouring Trey is going to be forced to shuffle or just immediately buy a D, which would bankrupt him. So I imagine we'll see the shuffle here. But yes, only Too Many Revenants has satisfied his train liability. This has been a pretty fast train rush. All these players are in a little bit of danger here. Could be a bankruptcy. We see the NYNH running 2 trains. So the fact that the D has not come out is really going to help MP, who controls 90% of this revenue, should definitely pay this, and he will have a lot of cash going into the stock round to play with. CNO, as noted, is trainless and does shuffle. Going to combine the 2 treasuries and leave himself cash into the next stock round. PRR running a 4 train and is going to run for 190 and withhold it. So looking at the cash, nobody really has much cash except for MP Coin because everybody's been withholding and shuffling. So MP Coin should be able to build up a share lead here, but this is not to ignore the fact that he is still on the hook for a permanent train. So we'll see if Devouring tries to bring out a D train on the B&O right away. It would be very close in terms of bankruptcy. He may not be able to do it if this company falls back and his net worth decreases as a result. If that were to happen, I suppose MP Coin just wins, so he's not too worried about that. So I think MP Coin should expect his NYNH to pay at least once more. Devouring is going to sell out of the B&O. Well, that's even better for MP Coin, I suppose. Definitely running that 4 train now. And he's going to go back and buy an NYNH. HJM selling out of the CNO. And we'll go back for an NYNH as well. So I think everybody's expecting this NYNH to pay. MP Coin, he's going to sell out of the B&O as well. And buying a CNO. I will say that the B&O runs are looking pretty good for a D train. So the fact that Devouring sold down to 20% and left it a cheap presidency that's vulnerable, if you're an aggressive player, you may want to look towards the B&O. It has almost half a train in its treasury. So as long as you can ensure you're not going to go bankrupt, you may want to take that company. And the reason I say that is because MP Coin in particular has 3 trains across 2 companies. So as long as that D train doesn't come out early, he's going to be able to run a train in all these companies. And I mean, he would need 2 D trains instead of just 1, but he's halfway towards 1 already. And then with 3 presidencies, he would have great map control for the rest of the game. I think it's very aggressive to take the B&O here, but it's something that would be tempting if I were in the game. But maybe that's just why I go bankrupt, because I play too aggressively. So don't fault MP Coin for not doing it, but it is something that I think would be worth thinking about. Devouring Trey buying the NYNH again. HJM out of money. MP Coin, CNO. And Devouring Trey gets up to 40% of the NYNH. I'm surprised that MP Coin didn't snag at least one of those shares. Okay. Well, we're going to see these 2 players basically splitting each other's companies, it looks like. The CNO and the NYNH, which I think is probably better for Devouring, at least in the short term. Yep, 2 split presidencies. MP Coin still with cash. Devouring is going to sell a CNO and give MP Coin yet another share. Okay. He's selling a lot for a single B&M share. And HJM Quilter will pick up 1 share in the PRR as a result of it being sold down. MP Coin gets a 50-50 split on the CNO in brown. Pretty good for him. And goes back for a CPR. I think we're into the next operating round now. So pretty good stock round for MP Coin, but does have impending train liability. NYNH upgrading Boston, running for 330 and still paying it. He's not scared of this train rush. He's going to let somebody else get the upgrade and just force buy the D train, it looks like. NYC running a 6 for 230. Erie has been tokened at Rochester. That's real bad news. This company's going to be running a D train and doesn't look like it's going to have that great of a run. Runs for 70, withholds, halfway to a D train. B&M running out just a 4 for 180. He is going to withhold. Okay, so MP Coin is a little bit preparing here. Devouring Tray, no train, and is going to sell. He sells all those NYNH shares, so just got a single payout from it. And unfortunately for him, he's not actually able to hurt the net worth at all. It's already ledged. So now the NYNH has a full market to play with. And the D train comes out. CPR running for just 90. CNO does have a route and pays it. So good news for MP Coin, who's half that presidency. He's going to need that cash to fund his own D train. PRR in brown has a good 6 run for 290, pays it. NYNH. The operating order is working out really nicely for MP Coin. He has the permanent train operating ahead of his trailing company, so he's going to get to run it at least once more. We'll see if he wants to try and shuffle any cash into the NYNH to afford his D train. Not sure where he's going with this. Maybe just setting up an escape valve for the B&M in the future. Runs for 190, pays it. 90% of the revenue makes sense to pay. NYC, not sure where he's heading. Pittsburgh is already tokened. Running for 230. CPR heading towards the offboard. Running for 90. Erie, trainless, and is going to sell. So that hurts HJM quite a bit. I think she's trying to get into the 00 so she can hit all 4 00s with her D train, but isn't going to really have cash for a token to defend that probably. And there are other companies, the CNO, the BNO, that could potentially get access here. The CPR can get access from the north. So that D run is going to be hard to maintain. BNO is going to have a great run on the D train, but Devouring is probably going to end up running this as a minority president since he only has 20% of the company right now. So even though the runs are going to be great, may not be great for just Devouring Tray, just great at depleting the bank. Columbus gets upgraded, runs for 320 already. B&M trainless, and we do see the shuffle. So MP Coins can be running a D in the NYNH, it looks like. And we will see if he wants to buy that in 6.3 or not. He would be pretty able to afford it with a minimal sell, but it's going to leave him with very little cash in the next stock round, and he may want to preserve his share lead. So could see him shuffle again and then just buy a massive amount of shares in the next stock round so that he can just maintain his share lead for the rest of the game. Devouring. Run them for 240, PRR still brown, and is going to pay out. So now moving into orange. NYC looking to bypass Dunkirk and Buffalo, but really not sure where they're hoping to get. MP Coin is operating the NYNH, and we'll see if he buys the D or not here. He does. Doesn't have to sell any shares, so that's good. CPR links up with the offboard. Revenue is 130 now. BNO D run gets into Chicago, running for 380, so that's really good. CNO, not sure where they're heading. I think that the BNO and the CNO really should have been working to get into this offboard and preventing the Erie from getting there. This kind of stuff could be done later. B&M, no track for him, just running for 190. Erie does get into the second 00, so has blocked the other companies from accessing this track. Hasn't blocked the NYC, who can upgrade here with a gentle curve. So needs to worry about the CPR tokens and the NYC tokens still. It's going to withhold to stay brown. PRR, last company to operate, is paying for 290. That brings us into the stock round, and everybody has a fair amount of cash. MP Coin is a little bit behind just because he had to buy the D train late in that operating round, but really not too far behind and already has 4 shares, so looking pretty good for him. Everybody has met their train liability. Early in the stock round here, we're going to see a run on these cheap B&O shares. It's the best company in the game by far, and these shares are very cheap, so no reason not to buy them. Everybody gets one, which is what I was talking about. Devouring is probably going to end up with a minority presidency or a pretty split up presidency. Devouring is going to go back for the more expensive IPO. Looks like too many revenants went back for that. Devouring now does follow suit. HJM is going to buck the trend and go for the cheaper Erie shares. And MP Coin will follow suit by buying his NYNH. Too many revenants still pressuring for the BNO. and Devouring buys the last one. So it ends up with 50% of the presidency, actually better than I expected. I thought he was going to end up running like 30 or 40% of it, but the other players let him get a bunch of shares there. This BNOD run is going to be a monster. We can tell that already. He's got cooperation with the CNO and the BNO, and he's able to lock down the track at Pittsburgh. So all this track here is his for the taking, and it won't be hard to make that happen, especially if the CNO withholds his trailing company to get into yellow. He'll have all the money he needs for track. He already has 2 track lays in the BNO stored up. HJM still buying cheap Erie shares. MP Coin also prioritizing cheap shares, which is the right move. He came in with less money than the rest of the players, so they're all buying $100 shares from the IPO while he's snagging $40 shares. That's going to allow him to keep his share lead moving. Too Many Revenants buying the PRR now, but does have to buy the more expensive IPO share because MP Coin was a little ahead of him in snagging the cheap one. Devouring Trey buying the NYNH. HJM still on this Erie kick. She's really prioritizing this Erie, putting all of her eggs in that basket. MP Coin, again, snags the cheap market share, playing this really well. Too Many Revenants, going to buy the NYNH, Devouring Trey, NYNH. Those 2 players going to sell that company out, it looks like. HJM snags the last one. MP Coin is able to buy a PRR. So he's really been focusing the brown and yellow shares, the cheaper shares, but is finally out of cash. 5 shares ahead of his closest competitor, but she's got at least another 3 shares left for her, maybe more. Too Many Revenants last share for him. PRR now floating up. Devouring Trey will go for the CPR. HJM still on the Erie and buying it from the IPO. Let's think about this here for a moment. We're looking at the market. The Erie is already on the brink of leaving brown or leaving orange. If she buys them all, she'll float up. If she doesn't buy them all, she's still going to have to withhold twice to stay orange. So taking a $49 hit on a share that's only paying for 130 and probably will have no stock appreciation is a hard sell for me. I think there's probably better shares to be buying. HJM buying the Erie again and gets up to 90% of it. So isn't going to float up at least, but does have 3 shares above the stock limit. I suppose if she withholds and then pays, she's just in yellow, can sell just 1 share, and that will mean that her shares have appreciated by $1 and paid for 130. Maybe we can expect another $50 on that, so 180, somewhere between $13 and $18 a share for a $49 deficit. Definitely not going to be paying off in this set of operating rounds, but I suppose if she holds them for another set, we'll see minimal gains there. Operating round 7.1, NYC is up and links up with Pittsburgh. Kind of a strange track choice for Too Many Revenants. I'm not really sure where he's hoping to get with this. Doesn't really help his run at all. Pittsburgh is only $30. Already had a run into Dunkirk for 50. So really spent a lot of track points developing this corridor here for really no benefit that I can discern. NYNH running a D train looking to bypass Rochester. This is going to be very easy to block. Very hard for this upgrade to go his way, I think. D run is just 260, pretty underwhelming. CPR, not sure where they're heading. Probably just hoping to incorporate this DIT into their run. The CPR track is so bad in basically every game. I'm not faulting Too Many Revenants, but this area of the map is just not lucrative. Pays it for 130. B&O D run is pretty good. Already getting into Toledo, has money for the Detroit track, so like we mentioned, may have to withhold once on the CNO, but is going to have a great run. Running for 380. CNO is going to upgrade Columbus, just helping his other company. B&M yellow. Does he want to stay yellow? He's going to pay it out for now. PRR running the same 6 run. I will note that the B&O secured its run at Philly. That was a little bit of a liability for it in terms of the PRR potentially tokening. This doesn't hurt the PRR that I can tell, but it does secure the B&O so he can sleep easy at night, which I'm always a fan about. Erie gets that 00 and is running for 170. and does withhold. So maybe she's trying to stay orange. NYC blocks the NYNH from bypassing. That's pretty expected. And is going to pay it out. NYNH doesn't really have any track left unless he wants to withhold. Pays for 260. CPR does complete that link, $10 more for his revenue. BNO is going to get another track over here. So this run is going to gradually improve. CNO is upgrading it. Looks like he is orienting it so that he can run into Flint, Lansing, and then into Chicago. Eventually, maybe even be able to lay the double gentle curve. So he has a run into Chicago, but then he can double back through this double O and head east through London and potentially into these double O's here. The B&O has a lot of room for growth still. B&M, no track for it. PRR, same route. Erie upgrades Hamilton and is going to run for 190. That's kind of what we were expecting. Last run in this operating set, NYC upgrading pretty random track, paying NYNH nothing to do. CPR heading over towards the double O's. The Erie can't do all that much about it. The way they oriented this track, it's going to take them 2 track points to get over here, and the CPR is operating ahead of them. So CPR does have token money and does have the capability of cutting runs on the Erie if HGM Quilter isn't careful. I think she needs to be very deliberate in the way she orients this track here. Needs to probably ignore trying to get the run into the last double O and instead head up to Barrie, or potentially head down into London and start trying to token out the B&O, or at least take advantage of the B&O track. B&O doesn't have any tokens left. The CNO is going to be very reluctant to token anywhere that would cut the B&O's run. And actually, the CNO is also out of token. So I think the Erie needs to make sure that they don't set up a loop for the CPR to get into their track, basically. The CPR is going to get into this here. That's a guarantee. Just cut your losses and head up to Barrie and the offboard, or start heading west towards the B&O track. B&O heading towards Flint and is running for 420. This run has got room for growth still. B&M, nothing to do. CNO is cooperating with the B&O as usual. PRR, nothing going on there. Erie is going to make it so that the CPR can link up directly into their track. Does have token money, so needs to token right here. And this will work out fine. Then it can run into Montreal and increase its runs. Does not lay the token, and I think that's going to be a very painful result for HGM Quilter. We are into stock round 8, and MP Coin is over the cert limit. We'll have to sell here. He was buying all those brown shares last stock round, but they all are now in the normal phase of the market, so that's a little bit painful for him. Before we see what he sells, we will note that he has about an $800 lead on his closest competitors, and HGM Quilter, as a result of these heavy investment in the Erie, has the ability to overtake MP Coin's share lead, but a tall order to come back from this kind of deficit with $6,000 left in the bank. There may be 2 stock rounds left. Sorry, 2 operating rounds left. This one and then a stock round and the next one. Just because we're over $6,000 and we're going to see people buying some shares here to improve the health of the bank pool. But her companies are just not very good. So even if she has a share lead, I don't know if there's high value shares for her to buy that are going to make her a factor in this game. I am watching this B&O very carefully. Devouring ended up with more shares in it than I expected and is in last place by about $1,000. But if this B&O really blows up, there's a possibility for him to have really good revenue. 2 Minute Revenants has the most shares in the B&O after Devour and Trey, so also still a factor in this game. His CPR, though, is so bad, it's going to be hard for that to be an asset for him. MP Coin is first up and will sell directly out of the CNO. CNO has decent revenue. I guess, I wonder, maybe he was worried about a dump? Is that possible? I don't think so. This player's never going to withhold on the B&O to have it operate after the CNO. So I wonder why the decision was to sell the CNO instead of the CPR. CPR is a little bit ahead on the stock market, so it has better stock appreciation. But if you sell the CPR down, it falls down. So now its stock appreciation is going to be a little bit worse. I mean, it's still appreciating for 10, but now it's one row back on the market. Yeah, I don't know. Sells out of the CNO and is at its cert limit now. Too Many Revenants is going to buy that CNO. Devouring Tray going for the CPR. HJM Quilter has to sell one share on her Erie and is now back in brown. So I think that we've already talked about this. Buying those shares probably didn't help her at all during the stock round or during the last operating round, but now she gets to hold on to them again. So they will end up paying a little bit. I still don't think they're going to be really worthwhile, especially since she's left herself vulnerable for the token on the CPR. If that happens, these shares are trash. Going to buy a CPR. MP Coin is able to pick up the share that HM Quilter sold, so that's good news for him at least. Too Many Revenants, CPR, Devouring Tray CPR, and now I think we'll see the rest of these shares being bought. Everything should sell out, I think. The only issue here is that people are nearing their cert limit. So with 7 shares left, yeah, we should see everything sold. Okay. HJM is going for the CNO. MP Coin is going to buy the last Erie there. So despite being at a cert limit at the start of the game, has actually managed to pick up some shares here. He is trailing HM Quilter in shares, and that's kind of unavoidable, but it's a little bit less bad than I feared for him. He had to sell 4 shares, but has now bought 2 new shares, so net loss of 2 shares for him could have been much worse. Too Many Revenants, CNO, Devouring Tray buys the last CNO, HDM Quilter looking towards the B&M, and I think we'll just see that company sell out. Yes, so everything's sold, and MP Coin will maintain priority. NYC is up. I don't think the NYC has any track really. It's going to try and bypass Pittsburgh. That should be a pretty easy block. NYNH out of track, paying for 260. CPR gets into the double O's, and we do see the token. So this was the disaster scenario for HM Quilter on the Erie. Could have been prevented with a token here. Should have been prevented, but was not. And now the Erie is a dead company. It's going to run for 110, 130 for the rest of the game. There's nothing else it can do. Suppose you could look at upgrading this and then try and get into this track that the NYC was laying, but you're going to need both of the, let's see here, you need both of these tiles, and there's none available. So actually, this is never going to work. Yeah, the Erie is totally dead. B&O still going to be optimizing its routes and is running for a monstrous 500. This is really nice for Devouring. We'll have to look at the revenue in a moment and see if he has a chance in this game. B&M, no track for him. CNO is laying the double curve that we talked about, so probably going to eventually look to get into these double O's, potentially all the way up into Montreal. The CPR does not have cash for tokens, so I don't think that Devouring has to be overly worried about the B&O runs being cut. PRR, nothing to do, and Erie is going to work on this here, but again, there's no valid upgrades, so that's a dead end. Runs for 140, pays it. Let's look at the revenue here. We may be able to start skipping through this game. I think it's basically determined. There's not anything interesting to do in terms of track. So in terms of net worth, MP Coin is up by 600 on Too Many Revenants, and the revenue is minimally favoring Too Many Revenants. Devouring is running for a little bit more, and actually HDM Quilter is too. I think that's just a function of your share lead. But the revenue is so close. The difference between the greatest and the least is, about $60 or $50. So with a lead of $600 and it looks like 4 more operating rounds, that's not going to be enough. MP Coin is going to win this game unless the B&O really blows up here to change that. So let's just skip these operating rounds and look at the B&O track. Already, we've seen them upgraded into the double O. Needs this upgrade here to take full advantage of the run into Montreal, which I imagine we'll see pretty quickly here. Let's look at this. Yes, that has happened. So the B&O's run is up to 630. That is huge. And looking at the revenue, now Devouring Tray is running for 150-ish more than MP Coin, give or take, but is still $700 behind. Too Many Revenants is running for $100 more and is $500 behind. We have 3 operating rounds left, so I don't think there's any room for growth for the B&O track. That revenue should be stable, and as a result, I believe MP Coin is going to take this. Not a massive margin, but he does win by about $300. So B&O had great runs, but just was too little, too late. MP Coin is able to eke out a win here on the back of the NYNH and the B&M, which really didn't have that great of revenue, but got the trains in time to win. That's game B. We're going to jump into game C. Game C is contested between Juicy Berry, Nate, Pseudostock, and A. Murphy. We are going to skip the auction, and we will see in stock round 1 that the C&O splits as a pretty split presidency, or floats as a pretty split presidency. The only other company to float is the NYNH. The PRR was just a few dollars short, I think $5 short of floating in the first stock round, so just a 2 company to float. The C&O is going to lay pretty standard track, buys 2 trains. NYNH is heading towards the NYC, buys a single 2 train, and we're into stock round 2. 2 will see the PRR float, but otherwise is unremarkable. The C&O does link up with Chicago. We see that now it's a true 50-50 split. Pseudostock should probably be looking at trying to dump this here. It does have priority. Never want to run a company with a 50% co-investor, especially early in the game like this. Pays it out and buys a second, actually buys 4 2 trains. So that leads me to believe we probably will see a dump here. PRR is operating for the first time, and even though there are 4 2 trains in the C&O, the PRR, which is the CNA player, buys a single 2, does not buy the 3 to buy in the CNA and the Champlain and St. Lawrence. So that's a big missed opportunity. Would be running away with this game at this point if they had bought in their privates. NYNH, on the other hand, is going to lay NYC and does buy in their private, the MNH. So only one player is taking advantage of the C&O situation. Pseudostock bought 4 2 trains, anticipating a dump here, but we actually see that they do not, which is not, I think, the right decision. You don't have to buy 4 2 trains, but if you do, I think you have to dump. A. Murphy passing. Juicy is going to get the NYC. So this player is the only player that bought in their privates, now has the NYNH and the NYC. Not a high par, so a little bit of train liability potential for them, but this synergy is very good. And then Nate P, huge risk of dump here, has a B&O that it could be floating, is going to just say, I'm fine with the status quo. And we will see a split 50-50 C&O continue in this game state. Juicy is just floating, and we will pass into the third operating round. C&O 4 2 trains, lays the not number 2 tile, is going to run 2 of the 4 trains and pays it out. So Nate P is getting away with murder here, and I believe now has priority. So Pseudostock missed the only opportunity they were going to have to dump this company, probably. C&O buys in his privates. NYC upgrades New York and will buy a 3 train. NYNH 2 trains. It's actually going to make a beeline down to Reading and Allentown. Recognizes that they have the NYC and the NYNH and uncontested access into Reading and Allentown with a number 2 track available. This is kind of the dream scenario. This is a very, very strong start for Juicy Berry. The NYNH is going to run his trains for just 90. PRR heads to Lancaster, tokens it, and is going to pay for 30, buys the 3, and buys in their privates. Probably should have done that last operating round as noted. C&O laying towards Pittsburgh, still just running 2 of his trains. NYNH gets the number 2 track, so this is the scenario we were discussing, and is going to run 2 trains out of New York now for 200. PRR lays Philadelphia, immediately blocks itself. So we were talking about how good of a situation this was for Juicy Berry. It just keeps getting better. Now safe from tokens from the south, unless the B&O were to get into Philadelphia. So this track is all just Juicy Berries to control. NYC going to run his 3 train for 90, pays it. We are into stock round 4. Nate has been living off the CNO and really at high risk of a dump, but didn't actually happen. So now is able to reap the rewards. Very high share value, sells it down, has a ton of cash, and is going to start buying his own B&O. The B&O is potentially a decent company here still. Probably not too worried about Lancaster, but does have access potentially into Philadelphia and Brown. So needs to make sure that if he floats the B&O, that trains get pushed and he isn't locked into just the Baltimore track running into Atlantic City for a while. Pseudo stock buying the NYC, A. Murphy buying the NYNH, Juicy Berry buying the NYH as well, correctly probably identifying that these two companies are going to be powerhouses. Now up to 60% of both of them. Nate still floating the B&O, has a ton of cash. Pseudo stock buying the NYNH. These companies might sell out. A. Murphy's going for the CNO. That, on the other hand, is not a company that I think you should be buying. It has 4-2 trains. Maybe we'll get to run them once, but it's definitely going to be falling back here. Juicy Berry buying a PRR. Nate still floating, pseudo stock, PRR, and trashing it. Not sure what that's about. A. Murphy actually helps Nate float the B&O. So Nate's getting a lot of help this game. Juicy Berry going back for the CNO. Nate, NYC, pseudo stock, B&O. A. Murphy is now going to put $200 into the Erie. Would have to sell very heavily to float this. May just want to reserve the presidency for now. Juicy Berry out of cash. Nate is going to buy the NYNH. Pseudo stock buying more into the B&O, so leaving himself potentially open to a dump. It is Nate's only company, so unlikely, but it's just going to trash it right away. So I think we're seeing some of these players just trash shares for the sake of trashing shares. I suppose putting the B&O behind the CNO makes it more likely that your CNO is going to run its 2 trains twice. Maybe. A. Murphy buying the NYC, and Nate still picking up cheap shares, pseudo stock. He's been doing a lot of trashing, but does end up with 20% of the NYC. And it looks like mostly paying shares here. Nate puts $100 into the Erie for no reason. And we're into operating round 4. CNO, 4 trains, does get into Pittsburgh. With a token here, can run all 4 trains, so that's a little bit of a gift here. And is not going to do it. So has 4 trains, only going to run 2 of them. This Pittsburgh token is something that the CNO is going to want eventually, so really should have just tokened it here. It's only $40. Would improve his run by $30 here and $40, so another $70 to his run that he's missing out on for no reason. B&O is going to head south and buys a 3, buys 2 3s even, and the 4, so that's very aggressive. Pseudo stock only got to run his 2 trains the one time and is now going to have to out of pocket of 4. Wasn't running those 2 trains optimally anyways, so I guess no big loss. NYC upgrades Albany, running for 100, buys a 4. NYNH gets into Rochester and is going to pay, actually withhold 130. Juicy Berry has great map position, but does have some train liability potential, so I don't hate a withhold early on. Got plenty of trains between the 6 and the players right now, so not in imminent danger, but with enough floats in the next stock round could be. Buys a 4 out of the NYC. The NYNH does have better runs than the NYC, so I like that. Operating order works out well here for Juicy Berry in the sense that he gets to run the 4 and then shuffle it into the better company, so the NYNH runs are going to be really nice. PRR is upgrading Lancaster and runs for 90. CNO, trainless as noted, is going to lay random track to block the B&O, and then tokens in Lancaster. Lancaster is not good this game because it's been blocked at Philly. So I think that if you're going to drop the $40 token, you might as well have dropped it on Pittsburgh, but I've already talked about that. Buys the 4, NYC, heading over to the double O's, and Juicy Berry does not have priority. I was going to say, if he had priority, he may want to start trashing the Erie or try and take it over and run all 3 companies if he could. No guarantee that he would be able to get the Erie, of course, so maybe that's just worthless theory crafting. but is going to head over to these double O's and set up for some really nice runs. Needs to make sure that they play defensively and defend their track from the Erie. An Erie token somewhere here could really mess things up for him. B&O, 3 trains. I don't think he's going to have runs for 3 trains. Just running 2 of them for now. Would have to token in Washington to run all 3 trains, which is probably not worthwhile. So just 120 PRR, upgrading Pittsburgh, and is going to token in Philly. So we've been talking about how bad this track lay was, and now doubles down with a bad token. NYNH is giving the NYC double access into both of the New York tiles as well, running 2 trains for 270, really nice. And we're into stock round 5. So we've been talking about how Juicy Berry is really well positioned in this game, and it's already starting to show. Has the net worth lead, has the share lead, has the most cash into this stock round, and really no one is competing with them. I think it would not be unreasonable to call the game for Juicy Berry here, but we will continue just a little bit more and see how this develops, if anybody is able to break into the 5s and make a big change in the game state. Pseudo stock is up, buys a B&O. A Murphy is passing. Okay. Probably something she could be doing with her money there. Juicy Berry is going to sell a C&O and a PRR NYC, selling very heavily, and is going to float the B&M. So we were talking about Juicy Berry trying to take the Erie. Instead, is going to take a B&M. Has 3 companies now, and the B&M was a liability. A token, unfriendly token from the B&M could cut runs in Albany, so reasonable to take this. And with a $120 investment, the B&M is going to be able to run basically all the same track that the NYC and the NYNH can. So as long as Juicy Berry plays defensively and tokens here in Philly and prevents the Erie from getting into Rochester, all 3 of these companies are going to have great runs. Yeah, so game's looking very good for Juicy Berry. The only thing to worry about is the train roster. Don't want to bankrupt yourself in the NYNH, for instance. But with $500 in the NYC and a full treasury in the B&M, I think we'll probably be just fine. Nate is going to sell a B&O and buy an Erie. So he's going to try and take the Erie from A Murphy. We'll see if that wakes A Murphy up and stops her from passing. Pseudo stock, buying the NYC, recognizing that this is a great company. A Murphy is going to buy a B&M. Are they just going to lose control of the Erie here? Okay. Juicy Berry buying a B&M. No chance that A Murphy takes this presidency. And they do. They just lose the Erie. Wow. Okay. Well, whatever. Pseudo stock. Passing on cash. A Murphy is passing as well. Juicy Berry is left to float on his own. Erie has floated as well. Pseudo stock is going to sell the NYC, so I think I spoke too soon when I said that they recognize the value of that company, and they are going to instead be floating the CPR. Okay. So we will see a pretty fast train rush here with 3 companies floating, I'm sure. A Murphy is selling out of the Erie that she lost and will buy a CPR, helping that company float. B&M is now floated. CPR is still working on the float. Juicy Berry is selling so that he operates behind these other 2 companies potentially. I think that's wise. CPR almost floated. Erie already floated. A Murphy's passing again. Juicy Berry is going to float the CPR and sell it. I like that a little bit less. I was hoping that they would operate behind the B&M. Is the CPR a suitcase? It is potentially. So maybe knows that the Erie is more likely to buy trains, but not necessarily the case. I don't know. It's very unpredictable if the Erie or the CPR buy trains or not. Pseudo stock buying the cheap CPR. A Murphy still passing. Juicy Berry passing. Pseudo stock out of cash. And we will go into the stock round or operating round. So this operating round 5, and the way these trains break is going to determine this game. Juicy Berry with a very commanding position in the game. Erie is going to lay towards Rochester and will immediately buy the poison 4 and the train out of the B&O and the 5. Okay, so just wanted to shuffle cash into the B&O and then we'll discard a train. That's fine. B&O now has near permanent train money. And he was going to have to discard a train in the B&O either way, so at least he got the cash over there before he did it. B&M is going to upgrade his home, and this gives Juicy Berry 2 5s. So I think that at this point, the game is called, or I would call the game. Juicy Berry has unassailable track, has 2 permanent trains for his 3 companies already. So will eventually need a 6 or a D train, but between his 3 companies has, you know, close to $700. So not going to be bankrupting. Probably he's not going to have to really sell shares to get this, since he has a 4 and 2 5s already. So he doesn't really have to buy trains until the D train comes out, and should have plenty of time for that. So the game does go on for a while, but it's pretty clear who's going to win. We don't have to watch that. Juicy Berry takes this in a landslide by, a several $1,000 lead. And if you look at the track, this is the only interesting part here. They do exactly what they have to do. So Juicy Berry did this perfectly. Token down south here to make sure that nobody was able to sneak a token into their runs. Otherwise left the track open so that the B&M, the NYC, and the NYH could all have great runs. And then we see that eventually the other players are able to sneak a run into this track through Scranton, but I'm not going to go back through the game and look when this happens. I imagine that this is very late in the game. All these track upgrades are going to take a very long time, and it's so circuitous that I'm sure Juicy Berry was doing their best to defend it, and then eventually they're able to sneak a run in through all these upgraded tracks here. So the game ends up ending in OR9. We called it in 5. Maybe this kind of crazy track happens in OR8 or something like that. But no one actually is able to token anywhere, so it doesn't really matter. Well played to Juicy Berry. The other players had a lot of mistakes, so he's able to run away with this game. We're going to move to Game A just very briefly. Game A, I don't really have anything to say about. We're not going to comment it at all. Want to be kind in my commentary. So we'll just say without comment that R. Scott takes this game with a narrow victory. So that's the 3 games this week. We have one more week coming, and then we may do the final tournament. The current standings we can review, and we see that Devouring Trey has a 4-point lead on MP Coin, and the most points you can get in a week without being a substitute is 4. So I think Devouring Trey is basically mathematically guaranteed to win the league, as long as they show up next week. And I don't think there's really anything anybody can do about it. I suppose if King Zombie or MP Coin were somehow determined to be alternates, they could eke out a win here, but seems very unlikely since those players have been showing up consistently. So I think Devouring Trey is going to win this, but there is 1 week left. Thanks for watching. We'll be back next week.